Founder Suge Knight had a lot to say about the Tupac Shakur murder trial during a jailhouse interview with TMZ. Knight was in the car with Tupac the night he was shot on the Strip in September of 1996.
For 30 years, one man sat on the truth. He watched Tupac Shakur die 2 feet away from him, and he never told a courtroom what he saw. Now, days before the only murder trial ever connected to that night, Marion Suge Knight has picked up a phone from inside a California prison cell and said something that has both sides of the case on edge. It isn't a confession. It's a warning. And buried inside it is a name that has haunted the music industry for 3 decades. Suge Knight is 61 years old. He is housed at Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility outside San Diego, working through a 28-year sentence for running down and killing a man named Terry Carter in a Compton parking lot in 2015. Barring an early release, Knight will be in his 70s before he ever walks outside prison walls again. By any normal calculation, he has no reason to speak to a journalist. He has already lost his freedom. He has nothing left to bargain with, and nothing left to protect except his own code. And yet, in the first weeks of August 2026, as jury selection opened in the Las Vegas trial of Dwayne "Kef" D. Davis, Knight gave an interview to ABC News that landed like a grenade in the middle of the courtroom drama. Davis, a former shot caller in the Southside Compton Crips, is the only person ever formally charged in connection with the drive-by shooting that killed Tupac Shakur on September 7, 1996. Knight was driving the car. He is the last living eyewitness, and prosecutors have listed him as a potential witness, which means, on paper at least, he could be forced onto the stand. Knight made it clear exactly how he feels about that possibility. "This trial has nothing to do with me," he told ABC News, "and if somebody brings me there, it's gonna hurt whoever brings me there. I promise you that." He went further in the same conversation, telling the network that if Davis's own lawyers subpoenaed him, it would backfire on the defense, and if prosecutors tried it, it would backfire on them too. His message, in his own words, was simple: "Leave me out of it." That is not the sound of a man preparing to cooperate. It's the sound of a man who has spent 30 years turning his silence into a form of leverage, and who is prepared to use it against literally anyone who tries to pull him back into a story he considers closed. To understand why a man who watched his friend bleed to death would rather stay silent than help convict the person accused of orchestrating it, you have to understand the world Suge Knight comes from, and the code that world runs on. To understand why Suge Knight's silence carries so much weight, it helps to remember who he was before he became a name attached to a cold case. In the early 1990s, Knight co-founded Death Row Records, and within a few years it had become one of the most dominant and feared labels in American music. It was the home of Dr. Dre's solo debut, of Snoop Dogg's rise from an unknown Long Beach artist to a national star, and eventually of Tupac himself, who signed with the label after Knight posted the bail that got him out of prison in 1995. Death Row wasn't just a record company. It operated with the culture, reputation, and internal discipline of an organization that blurred the line between the music business and the streets it drew its artists from. Knight built that reputation deliberately. Stories about his temper, his business tactics, and his willingness to intimidate people who crossed him circulated for years, some confirmed, some exaggerated into legend. Whatever the truth of any individual story, the larger point is this: Knight was, by 1996, one of the most powerful and most feared men in the music industry, someone artists, executives, and rival crews alike thought twice about crossing. That reputation is part of why his current silence lands so heavily. This isn't a passive bystander declining to get involved. It's a man who spent decades being the person other people were afraid to cross, now explicitly telling prosecutors and defense attorneys alike that pulling him into their courtroom will cost them something. It also explains why his allegations about a bounty land differently than they might coming from someone else. Knight isn't a distant commentator theorizing about the music industry from the outside. He ran a label that was, for a period, at open and well-documented odds with rival executives and rival crews on the East Coast, a rivalry that plenty of observers believe helped set the emotional temperature for what happened in September 1996 in the first place. Whether or not any individual claim he's made over the years holds up, he is speaking from inside the exact world the case revolves around, which is part of why networks keep putting a phone to his ear every time this case moves forward. Strip away the mythology for a second and look at the plain facts of that night. Knight was behind the wheel of a black BMW 750 Illinois. Tupac was in the passenger seat. When a white Cadillac pulled up beside them at a red light on Las Vegas's East Flamingo Road, gunfire tore through the car, hitting Tupac 4 times. Knight himself took shrapnel to the head. He made a U-turn on tires that had just been shredded by the gunfire and drove toward help with a dying man beside him. Tupac was pronounced dead 6 days later at the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada. For 3 decades, through police interviews, a grand jury,